All right, so our next project is going to be a black and white charcoal drawing on gray paper. We're going to do this in terms of understanding how we normally are going to always add the darks to our drawing. So we usually always start with white paper, and then with the white paper, you always add values to your paper with your pencils, with your colored pencils, with your markers, with whatever material that may be. So you're normally always just adding the darks. So now what we want to understand is how we start in that middle ground, and then we can add the darks and add the lights to gain a better understanding of value. So with our value scale that we did earlier on in drawing one, if you remember that, with the value scale, we used all the pencils. We went from 6B to 2H, B pencils being your darker lead because they're softer, H pencils being harder lead, therefore they are lighter and apply less paper or lead to the paper. So what we're doing now is we're starting somewhere in this middle value range of gray, and then understanding how to add that highlight instead of just leaving it as the paper, and then also add the darks. So adding the darks is nothing new for you, as we've done lots of pencil drawings, but now you are gaining a concept of how to add the lights. So what we're going to do is start off with some basic shapes first, just to kind of understand the material, because we're using materials that might not have been used before for you, with it, which is your charcoal pencils. We're going to start just doing some basic shapes and understanding how to develop form and three-dimensionality. Remember, form is one of your elements of art versus shape. Shape is just a two-dimensional object. So right now this is just a shape because it doesn't have any form or value to make it look three-dimensional. But then eventually we'll add everything we need to do with our charcoal, and we'll get three-dimensional objects like such on a two-dimensional surface. Okay, so what we're going to start off with, you all have two pieces of paper. One is you're just going to practice some basic shape objects like so, just to understand how to apply the material to the paper. And then after that, we're going to do a full-blown still life drawing with 4 objects that you find around your house, or whatever that may be, which we'll dive into in another class a little bit later on. But I selected just 4 objects that I found in the classroom, and then we created a horizon line. We should all be knowledgeable on that horizon line where the sky meets the ground, because we need to create that horizon line to ground the objects, and then we can add shadows under them so they don't look like they're just floating in space. So we have 4 objects here, which will be your requirement as well. Just understanding how to add the values, both light and dark, to develop, once again, that three-dimensional idea on a two-dimensional piece of paper. All right, so here's kind of the progressional steps we're going to do for our final drawing. We'll start kind of with just a basic sketch on paper with pencil. Okay, so for me, I had a lemon, a little piece of stump of wood, a bottle, and a tree house kind of thing, birdhouse. So I just did a practice gesture drawing of that. Once again, the gesture drawing is a quick study, just drawing it real quick. I'll go over that when we finish up our basic shapes with the charcoal to understand that better. Then we're going to take that drawing here, and we are going to then apply that drawing to our gray paper. Once again, starting with pencil and pressing light enough to eliminate all the pencil. In this example here, you don't see any pencil lines. It's all developed through the charcoal itself. So I'm pressing lightly with my pencil, but you need to press a little bit harder so you're able to see it, or use a softer lead. So for me, I would use a B pencil because it's a softer lead and therefore it's darker, so I would be able to see what I'm doing. Okay, then we'll talk about the direction of how we are shading things and how that also enforces the idea of form and three-dimensionality. We'll talk about adding our highlights with our white charcoal pencil and adding our darks with our black charcoal pencil, understanding the pressure and application to make it darker or lighter. Also think about how we add details and textures. Not everything needs to be blended out. Like for my feather here, not everything. I'm using a hatching method to show those textures and details versus me blending the apple because it's nice and smooth. So we'll dive in and discuss all that. But today we're just going to start with a few basic shapes. So you will just get your gray paper, and we're just going to kind of draw a few basic shapes. We'll definitely want to do a sphere. Okay, so we'll start with a circle, and then we'll turn it into a sphere, and then we can also do some other objects of your choice, and we'll do 2 objects. One requirement will be the sphere, and then you can pick what other objects you want to do here and understand the idea of developing form. So if I'm going to do a sphere and I don't have a compass, I can find something around the house and just kind of trace that. So I'll just put that right here, and I will trace around it to get a circle. A circle is a shape, a 2-dimensional object, and then we're going to turn it into a 3-dimensional form, which a circle then becomes a sphere. Okay, so we need to figure out where our light source is coming from. So I'll say my light source is up in this top corner. Okay, once again, we have that middle value already, which is the paper, and then we understand how to add our highlights and shadows. Once again, normally when we added highlights, we added the highlights by just not shading in that specific location. But now, since everything is that middle gray, we need to add that value with our white charcoal pencil. Okay, and you can kind of blend things out with your finger. You might have a blending stump at home from an art kit that you might have purchased on your own. You can use a paper towel, any of those things to kind of blend this out. And our sphere is a smooth object, so we'll want to make sure it's nice and smooth. So once again, I understand that my light source is coming from the top left, so that means my highlight would be located in this general vicinity, and then it's going to slowly blend out into that paper. So I can start to press a little bit lighter, pressing harder here to really develop that bright highlight. And then I'm slowly pressing lighter and blending into my already gray paper. Okay, then you'll do the opposite. So now we need to develop our darks, and we'll do that. This is, once again, what everybody does when drawing, especially on white paper. You always add your darks with your pencil. So not really a new concept here, but it might just be a little bit more aggressive because this charcoal is pretty dark. But just as always, with the charcoal pencil, you're going to press a little bit harder to apply more material to the paper, or more charcoal, where it needs to be darker, and then start to press lighter and fade into the gray paper, which once again is acting as our middle value. And in order for things to be 3-dimensional, we need a full range of value. Like in our value scales, we have the darkest darks, lightest lights, and everything in between. Okay, so you do. Understanding the direction of our marks is important as well. So notice how I'm like kind of shading in almost like a U shape or a C. That's helping to imply that my object is round. Okay, if I just were to come in and shade it this way or that way, that would flatten out the object, because we want to shade in the direction of our object. So we want to imply also the curvature. So you can see my apple is kind of shaded this way, create that roundness. Same thing here, both with the black and the white. I'm shading this vase, which is round, and I'm kind of going in the direction. So if I were shading like my fingers, I would also do that kind of round circular method, like a cylinder. Okay, if my box is flat, it's got a flat surface to it, then you can just shade like straight up and down. As far as my tree goes, I'm like kind of doing 2 birds with 1 stone by both shading in the correct direction to imply that it's going this way, but it's also creating that texture, because we know with wood's got that grainy texture. So on this, it's kind of achieving 2 things at one time. We're creating the texture. Maybe there's like a little crease divot right there. And then I'm also going in the direction. It would not make sense for me to shade and color or do whatever my object that goes this way and shade it the opposite way. Okay, so same thing with my vase right here, or my little bottle, I went this way and this is in perspective. This is a 2-point perspective situation because this goes to that vanishing point, and then this will go to that vanishing point. We just learned about that. So then you would want to shade going in that same direction. Okay, and that would help imply the three-dimensionality of your object. Okay, then my tree stuff here, it would make more sense to go up and down because of the wood grain. You can once again see on my lemon that I'm creating this curvature that once again helps imply that this object is round. If you just go straight up and down, we're implying it's flat. If you shade in a downward fashion or even an upward fashion, we're implying that things are round. So then once again, you can kind of see how I'm doing that. Okay, so then I'm starting to press lighter, blending into my gray, and then from the black to gray to white, understand where my shadows and highlights are located. We can once again create that horizon line, and then we would understand our shadow is on the opposite side of the light source. So I could come in and create that. Shadows are always darkest closest to the object, so then I can go ahead and press a little bit harder here. Fade it out into the lighter shadow because there's more light being captured over here, therefore making the shadow lighter. But there's less light being captured closer to the object, so that's why we go darker. Yeah, we can. Yes, my projector went out. All right, and then once again, you can start to think about creating just a value very lightly up against that edge of your horizon line, and then just slowly fading out just to create some sort of ground so it doesn't look once again like it's floating. Okay, now I can continue to work on this a little bit more and refine it and then make it kind of in this situation, but with my charcoal pencils on my gray paper. And then you have a fully developed form on a two-dimensional surface. So you're going to do the sphere, okay? And then on the other side of the paper, the space you have, you can pick one of these basic shapes, or I'll even let you start to maybe investigate another shape if you want to get some practice in. So if you want to find something around your house and do maybe a fruit or a stuffed animal or whatever you want to do, just to get a little bit more practice. It doesn't have to be a basic shape, but I do want everybody once again to be doing the sphere. Choice object here, once again, understanding the highlights, the shadows, building up the three-dimensionality with your blacks and whites on the gray paper. And then once we finish those two items, we'll then use our other paper to do a more finalized still life drawing with 4 objects and all the details, textures, highlights, shadows, lights, darks, and all that good stuff to create realistic looking objects with our black and white charcoal pencils on gray paper.